Okay guys, I'm going to go over your operations of complex numbers, the adding, subtracting, and multiplying them. These are the questions from this test review. It's number 1 through 6. I'm going to do each of them kind of quickly, but remember you can pause and go back if you need to. So starting out with number 1 and 2, they are adding. Adding because adding is between the two expressions or the two binomials. Adding is your easiest one. All adding means to do is to make sure you combine like terms. So for number 1, a good example, the like terms are your real terms. So 8 and 4 give me 12. And then 8i and negative 7i are your imaginary like terms. 8i plus negative 7i just gives me a positive 1i. So number 1 goes with E. Number 2, also addition. I can just combine like terms. The real go with the real. Imaginary go with the imaginary. You are adding the numbers together. You are summing them together. 7 plus a negative 9 is a positive 8, excuse me. And negative 9 plus a negative 10 is a negative 19i. So this guy, number 2, goes with D. 3 and 4, you're now doing subtraction. Subtraction is very similar to addition, except for you have one extra step. So for number 3, the first term will stay the same, the 3 plus 9i, but you've got to distribute the subtraction sign and subtract the numbers behind it. That means everything behind the subtraction will be multiplied by a negative 1, or just meaning its signs will switch to the opposite. A positive 2 becomes a negative 2. A positive 4 becomes a negative 4i. Once I do that, then I can combine like terms. Real go with real, imaginary go with imaginary. So you get 1, and you can put this in your calculator. 3 plus negative 2 or 3 minus 2 gives me 1. 9i minus 4i or 9i plus a 4i. Negative 4i give you a positive 5i. So number 3 goes with A. And then really quickly, same thing with number 4. The first term or the first binomial stays the same. The second one will switch the signs. The 4 becomes a negative. The negative 5i becomes a positive. We're distributing a negative 1, or you are doing the operation of subtraction. Real goes with real, imaginary goes with imaginary, very similar to addition. The extra step is just there for the subtraction piece. 8 plus a negative 4 or 8 minus 4 is 4, and negative 7i plus 5i or negative 7 plus 5i would give you a negative, that's not a negative 2i. So number 4 goes with F. Beautiful. Now, last and final operation we covered are multiplication. We know they're multiplication because there's no sign between them. They're stuck right next to each other, and if we saw just a number multiplied or right next to some other number, that would mean multiplication. For these, you can use your area models to organize your work and find your terms. The only thing you've got to be careful of is remember, I squared is the same thing as saying a negative 1. So for number 5, I am going to do 4 and 3i. Again, these don't matter which side I put them on as long as I keep them together. And I'm going to multiply to get the insides of my box. And I'm going to change colors for that. 2 times 4, 8. 2 times 3i is 6i. I'm going where they intersect. 4 times 7i is 28i. 3 times 7i, or 3i times 7i, will give me an I squared, very similar to saying x times x. You treat I just like a variable. And 3 times 7 is 21. Now, the only kicker here is you see an I squared. Like we said, I squared is the same thing as saying negative 1. So right here, I'm not going to bring out a positive 21i squared. He is actually saying the same thing as 21 times negative 1. Or 21 times negative 21 is a negative 21. Nothing else changes. I'm going to bring out my 8 plus 6i plus 28i. And now I have some like terms. I can now begin combining. I can now do the real with the real and the imaginary with the imaginaries, just like we did with everything else. 8 minus 21 is going to give me the negative 13. Remember, with complex numbers, we always put the real numbers first, then the imaginaries last. And that I squared went from being an imaginary, but since the I squared is negative 1, made him a real. And then I with I, 6i plus 28i is going to give me a positive 34i. So this guy, or number 5, went with, right here, letter C. Letter C. And then the last one, same thing, another multiplication. We've got to be careful of our I squared. I am going to do 7 minus 2i at the top, 8 and 4i on the bottom. Multiply what you have, combine your like terms. 7 times 8 is going to give me 56. Then you get negative 16i, 28i, and then negative 2i and 4i is a negative 8i squared. But we can be careful because that I squared we know means negative 1. So I'm going to bring out of this problem 56 minus 16i plus 28i. And instead of writing it as negative 8i squared, I'm going to go ahead and change it. Negative 8 times a negative 1, which is what I stands for, is just going to give me a positive 8. Now you can combine like terms. 56 plus 8 gives me 64. And then my imaginary and my imaginary, a negative 16 plus 28 gives me 12i, positive 12i, meaning that this one goes with B. I have matched them all up. That is the difference between each type. Addition being the easiest, subtraction follows very closely. Just make sure to distribute those negatives. Multiplication, use your area model to multiply. Combine your like terms. But remember, I squared is the same thing as negative 1.